Well, here's a story that gets the old heart pumping. Imagine you're in a quiet little village in southern Germany, a place called Matzes. It's 2022, and archaeologists are having a look around before some new houses are built. This is pretty standard stuff, checking the ground for any old bits and bobs. But then, they find something. Not just a bit of pottery or an old coin. They find a whole tomb, a stone chamber grave that's been sitting there, undisturbed for over 1,000 years. It's the kind of moment we live for in archaeology. A direct window, a perfectly sealed package, sent to us from the distant past. It's absolutely brilliant. The excitement must have been electric on that site. You can just picture it. The digging stops. Everyone gathers around. What have we got here? The tomb was from the early Middle Ages, around the 7th century. That's a fascinating, murky period we don't know enough about. It's the time after the Romans have left and before the great medieval kingdoms have really got going. Finding anything from this era is special, but a complete, untouched burial of a high-status individual? That's the jackpot. It's a chance to ask questions and, with a bit of luck, get some real answers about who these people were and how they lived their lives. What made this find even more thrilling was its condition. The tomb was a chamber made of stone, which had protected its contents remarkably well over the centuries. Inside, the team could see the faint outline of a skeleton, along with the shapes of various objects buried alongside it. This wasn't just a collection of bones, it was a complete burial scene, a moment frozen in time. The person inside had been laid to rest with great care and ceremony. This tells us straight away that he wasn't just an ordinary farmer. He was someone important, someone his community wanted to honor in a very big way. The big question for the archaeologists was how to get it all out without damaging a single thing. When a grave has been sealed for 1,350 years, everything inside is incredibly fragile. The textiles, the leather, the wood, all of it could turn to dust the moment it's exposed to the air. They knew they had a huge responsibility on their hands. This wasn't just about digging up treasure, it was about preserving a unique piece of human history. They needed a plan, a really clever plan, to make sure this story could be told in full without losing any of the precious details. And the plan they came up with was something else. So, how do you move a 1,350-year-old tomb without breaking everything inside? You don't. You move the whole lot, soil and all. The team on site, from the Bavarian State Office for the Preservation of Monuments, had a truly groundbreaking idea. Instead of carefully excavating every little piece out in the field, where it's exposed to wind, rain, and changing temperatures, they decided to lift the entire grave as one solid block. But to do that, they needed to make it, well, solid. Their solution was something straight out of a science fiction film. They were going to freeze it. Absolutely incredible. The plan was to use a technique more familiar to construction engineers than archaeologists. They would build a strong metal frame, a bit like a box, around the entire grave. Then, they would pump liquid nitrogen into the soil surrounding the tomb. Liquid nitrogen is unbelievably cold, something like minus 196 degrees Celsius. The idea was that this intense cold would freeze the earth, the stones, the bones, and all the artifacts into one single massive frozen block. It's a bold move, isn't it? If it worked, it would protect all the delicate organic materials inside, like leather and fabric, which are the first things to disappear. This freezing method was so important because it would create a stable environment. In a normal dig, as you remove soil, things can shift and collapse. Ancient wood can crumble, and textiles can disintegrate. By freezing the whole thing, you lock every single object and every grain of soil in its exact position. It's like pressing a giant pause button on the process of decay. This meant that the team could take the entire block back to their laboratory. There, in a controlled setting, they could take their time, slowly and carefully thawing it layer by layer, recording everything with pinpoint accuracy. It's the ultimate in careful archaeology. Think about the risks, though. This had never been done on this scale for a burial like this before. What if the extreme cold damaged the very artifacts they were trying to save? What if the block cracked while they were lifting it? It took immense courage and incredible scientific expertise to even attempt it. But the potential reward was huge. It offered a chance to see the grave not just as a collection of objects, but as a complete three-dimensional puzzle. They could study the exact placement of every item and learn so much more about the burial ritual itself. It was a massive gamble, but one that had to be taken. Once the freezing process was complete, the real nail-biting part of the operation began. The team now had an 80-ton block of frozen earth stone and priceless history sitting in the middle of their dig site. The next step was to lift it. You can't just hook that up to any old crane. This required precision engineering and nerves of steel. They brought in heavy machinery, massive cranes that would carefully hoist the frozen tomb out of the ground. Everyone must have been holding their breath. One wrong move, one sudden jolt, and centuries of history could have been shattered. The lift itself was a slow and steady process. Straps were carefully positioned around the metal frame that encased the frozen block. The crane operator, guided by the archaeological team, began to take the strain. Inch by inch, the huge block was raised from the hole where it had rested for over a millennium. It was a truly surreal sight, a chunk of the early Middle Ages, glistening with ice, hanging in the air. The team had successfully turned a piece of the German landscape into a transportable time capsule. This was archaeology and engineering working together in perfect harmony, a real time team special. After the block was safely out of the ground, it was loaded onto a special low-loader truck for its journey to the laboratory in Bamberg. The logistics of moving an 80-ton, temperature-sensitive object are mind-boggling. The journey had to be smooth and carefully planned. Once it arrived at the conservation facility, the block was placed in a custom-built cold storage unit, a bit like a giant freezer. Here, it could be kept stable at a constant low temperature while the scientists prepared for the next, even more delicate phase of the project, the slow and methodical excavation in the lab. This whole process shows just how far archaeology has come. It's not just about digging with trowels and brushes anymore. Today we use everything from ground-penetrating radar to DNA analysis, and in this case, cryogenics. The decision to freeze the tomb was a testament to the team's commitment to getting the maximum amount of information possible. They chose a difficult, expensive, and risky method because it was the best way to preserve the fragile evidence. It was a pioneering effort that respected the importance of the find and set a new standard for how we can approach these incredible discoveries in the future. So, after all that effort, who was the man inside the tomb? The scientists have nicknamed him the Ice Prince of Matzes. As they began the slow process of thawing and excavating the block in the lab, a picture of this individual started to emerge. Analysis of the skeleton revealed that he was a young man, probably in his late teens or early 20s when he died. It's quite a sad thought, isn't it? He was just at the beginning of his adult life, a life that was clearly full of privilege and power, but it was cut tragically short. We don't know how he died, whether from illness, an accident, or in battle. What we do know is that he was incredibly important. The sheer wealth of the items buried with him tells us that. In the 7th century, you didn't get a send-off like this unless you were part of the ruling elite. He was likely the son of a local chieftain or a powerful warlord. His family had the resources and the status to provide him with a burial fit for a prince. The objects placed in his tomb weren't just for show. They were meant to equip him for his journey into the afterlife and to reflect his high rank in that other world, just as they did in this one. Looking at his remains, scientists can tell us a little more. He was well-fed and strong, which is what you'd expect for someone of his standing. He wouldn't have been doing the back-breaking farm work of his people. Instead, he would have been trained in the arts of war and leadership from a young age. Life expectancy was short back then for everyone, but to die so young when you had so much must have been a huge blow to his family and his community. The elaborate nature of his burial is perhaps a reflection of their grief and the loss of a future leader. His story is a powerful reminder that history is about real people. It's not just about dates and events. Here was a young man with hopes and a future, part of a powerful family. He probably rode horses, learned to fight, and was preparing to take on the responsibilities of his class. But something happened, and his life ended. His tomb, this frozen time capsule, gives us a very personal connection to this distant, murky period of history. He's no longer just a skeleton, he's the Ice Prince, and he has a story to tell us across the centuries. Right, let's get to the good stuff. What do you put in the grave of a 7th century prince? The answer is a lot of seriously impressive gear. As the team in the lab carefully worked their way through the frozen block, they uncovered an astonishing collection of artifacts. These objects paint a vivid picture of the wealth and connections of the Ice Prince's family. This wasn't just about putting his favorite things in with him, it was a public statement of power. Every item was carefully chosen to equip him for the next life, and to show everyone left behind just how important his family was. One of the most spectacular finds was a beautiful glass bowl. In the early Middle Ages, glass was an incredible luxury item. It wasn't made locally in this part of Germany. This bowl likely came from a workshop far away, perhaps in the Frankish kingdom in what is now France, or it might even have traveled all the way from the Byzantine Empire. To own something like this was the equivalent of having a supercar today. It was a symbol of long-distance trade, wealth, and sophisticated taste. Placing it in the tomb was a way of sending the prince into the afterlife with an object of the highest possible value. Alongside the bowl, there were other personal items. The archaeologists found the remains of a small wooden stool, which is a very rare find. Wood usually rots away completely, but thanks to the unique burial conditions and the freezing technique, its form was preserved. They also found a lyre, a small harp-like musical instrument. This is fascinating. It suggests our prince was not just a warrior, but also a man of culture, perhaps a patron of the arts or a musician himself. It adds another layer to his personality, showing a softer side to this powerful young man from a martial society. And of course, there was the food and drink for his journey. Archaeologists identified the remains of meat and eggs placed in the tomb, provisions for his long trip to the other side. Everything was arranged with care around the body. There was also a full set of riding gear, including a bridle and parts of a saddle. Horses were essential for warfare and status in this period, and it's clear the Ice Prince was an accomplished horseman. His family made sure he would have his trusted steed with him in the afterlife. It's a complete package, a starter kit for a prince in the next world. A prince in this era was, above all else, a warrior. His power and his family's safety depended on his skill in battle. So, it's no surprise that the Ice Prince was buried with a full set of magnificent weapons. These weren't just standard-issue tools. They were works of art, symbols of his elite status as a fighter. The centerpiece of his arsenal was his sword. In the early Middle Ages, a sword was the ultimate weapon, incredibly expensive to make and owned only by the top warriors. The prince's sword was a spatha, a long double-edged blade designed for fighting on horseback or on foot. The detail on these weapons is extraordinary. The sword would have had an ornate hilt, perhaps decorated with gold or silver, and it was carried in a scabbard made of wood and leather. This scabbard, or what was left of it, was held by a magnificent sword belt. The belt buckle and fittings were often highly decorated, and they were a key part of a warrior's display of wealth. The archaeologists also found a seax, which is a long, single-edged fighting knife. This was a classic Germanic weapon carried alongside the sword as a sidearm. He was armed to the teeth, ready for any trouble he might encounter. He was also equipped for defense. The team uncovered a shield, which would have been made of wood covered with leather. Although the wood itself had mostly decayed, they could see its outline and, crucially, they found the metal shield boss. This is the domed metal piece in the center of the shield, used to protect the hand. The size and shape of the shield boss can tell us a lot about the type of shield and how it was used. He also had a lance or spear, the classic weapon of the Germanic warrior. With his sword, seax, spear, and shield, he was a formidable opponent. These weapons tell a story of a martial society. For the elite, warfare wasn't just a job. It was a way of life. A young man like the Ice Prince would have been trained to use these weapons from the moment he could walk. His skill in combat would have been his most important quality, the source of his authority and his family's prestige. Burying him with this complete set of warrior's equipment was essential. It ensured that he would maintain his status as a powerful leader and protector, even after death. It was the ultimate mark of respect for a fallen prince. Now here's a fascinating twist in the tale. Where did the Ice Prince's family choose to bury him? Not in just any old field. The tomb was discovered right next to the ruins of an old Roman villa. This is brilliant, because it tells us so much about what was happening in this period. The Romans had controlled this part of Germany for centuries, but their empire had collapsed about 200 years before the Ice Prince was born. But they hadn't just vanished. They left behind their roads, their buildings, and their legacy. And the people who came after them, like the Ice Prince's family, clearly knew all about it. By the 7th century, the Roman villa would have been a ruin, but a very impressive one. It would have been a large stone building, completely different from the wooden houses that the local Germanic people lived in. For them, these ruins were probably places of mystery and power, built by giants or ancient gods. Choosing to bury their son right next to this symbol of old power was a very deliberate act. It was a way for this new ruling family to connect themselves to the greatness of the past. They were saying, "We are the new Romans. We are the new power in this land." And it wasn't just the Ice Prince buried there. The archaeologists found other graves nearby, suggesting that his family had established a private cemetery, a burial ground just for them, right on the site of the old villa. This is a classic example of what we call the reuse of landscape. New powers often build on top of, or right next to, the symbols of the old powers to legitimize their own rule. It's like they were borrowing the villa's prestige. It sent a powerful message to any rivals. This land is ours, and it has been important for a very long time. This connection to the Roman past shows that the world of the Ice Prince wasn't as isolated as we sometimes imagine. Even though the Roman Empire was long gone, its influence was still being felt. People knew about it, and they respected its power. The Ice Prince's family were clever politicians. They understood the power of symbols. By creating their family cemetery at the villa, they were making a claim not just on the land, but on history itself. They were weaving their own story into the much older story of this important place, securing their legacy for generations to come. So, what does it all mean? A find like the Ice Prince of Matsys is more than just a collection of shiny objects. It's a rich source of information that helps us understand a time that has often been called the Dark Ages. This discovery shines a bright light on that period, showing us that it wasn't dark at all. It was a time of dynamic change, of powerful families, long-distance trade, and sophisticated culture. The Ice Prince and his burial tell us that the society of 7th century Germany was highly structured, with a clear ruling class that had immense wealth and power. The artifacts themselves are like pages from a history book we never knew existed. The glass bowl tells us about trade networks that stretched across Europe. The lyre tells us about music and poetry, showing that these warrior societies also valued the arts. The weapons tell us about the importance of military skill and the technology of warfare at the time. Every object has a story, and when you put them all together, you get a much clearer picture of what life was like for the elite in this corner of the world 1,350 years ago. It fills in the gaps that the written records just don't cover. This discovery also teaches us about beliefs. The careful arrangement of the tomb, the inclusion of food, weapons, and luxury goods, all point to a strong belief in an afterlife. They believed that death was not the end, but a journey to another world, and they believed that you needed to be properly equipped for that journey. You needed your weapons to defend yourself, your horse to ride, and your treasures to maintain your status. This burial is a physical expression of their worldview, their religion, and their hopes for what comes after life on Earth. It's a very human story of love, loss, and faith. Most importantly, the Ice Prince gives a face to the past. It's easy to think of history as just a list of kings and battles, but discoveries like this remind us it's about people. A young man, barely out of his teens, was laid to rest here with all the ceremony his family could afford. By studying his bones, his belongings, and his burial place, we can start to piece together his life. We can connect with him on a human level. He's no longer an anonymous person from the past. He is the Ice Prince of Matsys, and his story, thanks to the amazing work of these archaeologists, can finally be told. The story of the Ice Prince is not just about the past, it's also about the future. The revolutionary method used to recover his tomb, the Big Freeze, could change the way archaeology is done. This project has shown that it is possible to lift an entire burial, lock, stock, and barrel, and move it to a laboratory. This technique offers an incredible level of preservation, especially for fragile organic materials like wood, leather, and textiles. These are the materials that tell us so much about everyday life, but they are almost always the first to rot away in the ground. By taking the excavation out of the field and into the lab, archaeologists can work in a perfectly controlled environment. They can use advanced imaging techniques like CT scans to look inside the block before they even touch it. They can take their time, working with microscopes and delicate tools, to uncover every single detail without the pressure of bad weather or construction deadlines. This means we can get much more information from a site than ever before. The Ice Prince project has set a new gold standard, proving the value of this slow, careful, and scientific approach. Of course, this method is very expensive and complex. It won't be used for every single discovery. But for burials of exceptional importance and preservation, like this one, it offers a way to save information that would otherwise be lost forever. It represents a new partnership between archaeology, science, and engineering. As technology continues to develop, we will likely see more techniques like this being used. We are entering a new era of archaeology, where the work in the laboratory is becoming just as important as the digging in the field. It's an incredibly exciting time to be involved in uncovering the past. In the end, the Ice Prince of Matses has given us two amazing gifts. The first is a unique and wonderfully preserved look into the world of the early Middle Ages. He has shown us the wealth, power, and beliefs of his people. The second gift is a new tool for archaeologists. His frozen tomb has become a landmark project, a demonstration of how innovation and bold thinking can push the boundaries of our profession. His story reminds us that the ground beneath our feet is full of secrets, and with new ideas and new technology, we can learn to listen to the whispers of the past more clearly than ever before. What a discovery! Absolutely stunning!